Security is on their way, and if you're not gone by the time they get here, I will have you arrested." She said it loud enough for the entire marble lobby to hear. Her voice cut through the quiet hum of the air conditioning, through the soft classical music piped in from hidden speakers, through the muffled conversations of suited men and women clutching leather portfolios. Every head turned, every pair of eyes landed on the man standing at the reception desk, calm, still, wearing a simple gray cardigan over a white shirt, a brown paper bag tucked under one arm. He didn't flinch. He looked at her with the kind of patience that only comes from a lifetime of practice. He said, "I'm here for a 9 o'clock. She said, "You don't have an appointment, and this is a private firm. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. A woman near the elevator quietly pulled her handbag closer to her side. He had no idea what was about to happen to her. She had just made the worst professional mistake of her entire career. And in 4 minutes, the 3 senior partners of Caldwell, Hargrove, and Stein would walk through that lobby door and call him something that would drain every drop of color from her face. Have you ever been the most qualified person in the room and still been asked to leave it? Let me take you back, 22 hours earlier. The alarm went off at 5:15 in the morning, same as it always did. The man who reached over and silenced it without even opening his eyes was named the Honorable Marcus T. Webb. He had been waking up before sunrise for 31 years. It was a habit forged in a house with thin walls and a father who believed that the day belonged to those who met it standing up. The house he lived in now was quiet in a different way. Not the quiet of poverty, not the quiet of worry, the quiet of a life that had been built deliberately, brick by brick, over 3 decades. The kitchen was small but immaculate. The curtains in the dining room were the same ones his late wife Dorothea had sewn by hand the year they moved in. He had never replaced them. He never would. He made coffee in a tin percolator that was older than most of the law clerks who appeared before him. He scrambled 2 eggs. He ate standing at the counter, looking out the window at the oak tree in the backyard, the one his daughter had planted as a 3rd-grade science project. She was 34 now. The tree was taller than the house. On the kitchen table, beside his coffee mug, sat a leather-bound notebook. The cover was worn to a shine at the corners. Inside, in his father's handwriting, tight, careful, deliberate, were the notes from every case his father had ever studied, every argument he had ever made, every principle he had ever believed in. His father, the Honorable Elijah Webb, had been one of the first black federal judges in the state. He had carried that notebook to court every single day for 27 years. When he died, he left it to Marcus with a note tucked inside the front cover that said simply, "The law is not a weapon, it is a shield. Use it that way." Marcus took the notebook everywhere. It was not decorative, it was not ceremonial, it was the most important object he owned. He set it in the inside pocket of the cardigan he'd be wearing to the morning's appointment, a quiet, informal sit-down at the offices of Caldwell, Hargrove, and Stein, one of the city's oldest litigation firms. He had been asked to consult on a federal civil rights matter they were preparing to bring before his court. The meeting had been set 3 weeks ago by the firm's managing partner, Gerald Hargrove himself, who had called Marcus personally and said the firm would be honored by his time. Marcus had worn the cardigan on purpose. He always dressed simply for early morning meetings. He had learned a long time ago that the people worth meeting didn't need him to announce himself with cufflinks. He drove himself. He parked 2 blocks away, as he always did, because the walk helped him think. He carried his father's notebook under one arm and a brown paper bag in the other. 2 fresh pastries from the Haitian bakery on Clement Street, the one run by a woman named Claudette, who had been baking since before Marcus passed the bar exam. He brought pastries to every meeting. It was another habit, another inheritance. He had retired from active courtroom duty once before, briefly, at 62, and had found that retirement sat on him like a coat 3 sizes too large. He had gone back. His colleagues on the bench understood. Some habits are not hobbies. Some callings do not release a person simply because the paperwork says they should. He was now 67 years old and showed no sign of slowing. His docket was full. His rulings were cited. His courtroom was, by every account from every attorney who had appeared before him, the most orderly in the building. Not because he was harsh, but because he was fair. Fairness, Marcus Webb believed, was the most demanding standard in the world. He walked through the glass doors of 400 Hargrove Tower at 8:57 in the morning. The lobby was all marble and muted gold. A reception desk ran the length of the far wall. Behind it sat a young woman with sharp features and a headset pressed to one ear. Her name tag said Brittany. She looked up when he approached, and the warmth that had been on her face for the 2 suited men ahead of him evaporated completely. The transformation was swift, almost mechanical. A shutter coming down. He smiled. He said, "Good morning, I'm Marcus Webb. I have a 9 o'clock with Mr. Hargrove." She looked at him the way people look at something that does not belong where it has appeared. She typed something with 2 fingers. She looked at the screen. She typed again. She looked back at him with the expression of someone who has already decided what the answer is going to be and is just going through the motions of looking. She said, "I don't see anything." He said, "He may have put it under Judge Webb, or just Webb, Gerald Hargrove, the managing partner." Something shifted in her face, not recognition, something colder than that. She said, "Sir, this is a private law firm. We don't just see walk-ins." He said, "I'm not a walk-in. I have a scheduled appointment." She said, "I'm going to need you to step back from the desk." The lobby had gone quiet. A man in a charcoal suit near the elevator had stopped pretending to look at his phone. 2 women by the coffee station had turned. A paralegal carrying a stack of folders had frozen in the middle of the room like a photograph. The classical music kept playing from the hidden speakers. Vivaldi, something light and oblivious. Marcus stood very still. He said, "I understand there may be a clerical issue. If you could just call up to Mr. Hargrove's office." She cut him off. She said, "Security is on their way, and if you're not gone by the time they get here, I will have you arrested." And that is where we came in. He did not raise his voice. He did not step back. He simply looked at her with those patient, practiced eyes and said, "I'll wait." She blinked. It was not the response she had expected. She reached for the phone on her desk, but not to call the partners. She was calling the security desk on the first floor. 2 large men in dark uniforms appeared from a side corridor within 90 seconds. One of them put a hand on Marcus's arm. Marcus looked at the hand on his arm. He said quietly, "I suggest you remove that." The security guard did not remove it. He said, "Sir, you need to come with us." And Marcus Webb, federal judge, 22 years on the bench, son of Elijah Webb, let himself be walked toward the glass doors of 400 Hargrove Tower because he understood something the people in that lobby did not. He understood that the scene unfolding right now was already over. The outcome had been decided, not by the receptionist, not by the guards, not by anyone in this marble room. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Gerald Hargrove and his 2 partners, David Caldwell and Nina Stein, had just pulled into the parking structure 1 block away. And Gerald Hargrove had, for reasons no one would fully understand until later, decided to walk in through the front entrance instead of the private elevator. He had not done that in 11 years. Now go back and watch the moment Brittany reached for the phone. Watch her eyes. She was so certain. That certainty was the most expensive thing she ever felt. Gerald Hargrove pushed through the glass doors just as the security guard's hand found Marcus Webb's shoulder. He stopped walking. David Caldwell walked into his back. Nina Stein stepped around them both. Gerald said, "Marcus?" The lobby went so quiet you could hear the ventilation system in the ceiling. Gerald Hargrove crossed the floor in 6 long strides. He extended his hand. He said, "Your Honor, I am so sorry. We got caught in the garage. Have you been waiting long?" The security guard's hand came off Marcus's shoulder as if it had touched a hot stove. Brittany did not move. She had gone the color of the marble behind her. David Caldwell looked at her. He said, "What happened here?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Nina Stein looked at Marcus Webb with an expression that was equal parts apology and horror. She said, "Your Honor, please come upstairs. We have coffee." "We have." She looked at the brown paper bag. "Well, it seems you already brought breakfast." Marcus looked at Brittany one more time, not with anger, with something far more final than anger. He said, "Thank you for your time this morning." He followed the partners to the elevator. The doors closed, and in the lobby, in the silence that followed, every single person who had been standing there turned and looked at Brittany, the man in the charcoal suit, the 2 women at the coffee station, the paralegal with the folder stack, the security guards. Nobody said anything. Nobody had to. Upstairs in a conference room on the 14th floor, the meeting that Gerald Hargrove had been looking forward to for 3 weeks finally began. Marcus set his father's notebook on the table. He opened it to a section in the middle, his father's handwritten notes on the Civil Rights Act of 1964, margin annotations in pencil, underlines in red. He set the pastries from Claudette's bakery in the center of the table. Gerald Hargrove looked at the notebook. He said, "Is that?" Marcus said, "My father's. I carry it everywhere." Gerald said quietly, "Elijah Webb's notebook." Marcus nodded. He said, "He used to say that every case is already written somewhere. Your job is just to find the right page." The case they were there to discuss was a federal discrimination suit against a municipal housing authority. a pattern of denials stretching back 11 years, affecting more than 400 black families in the city's eastern district. Marcus was not there as a judge ruling on the case. He was there as a consultant advising on jurisdictional procedure, but his presence in that room, his name attached to that meeting, changed the weight of everything the firm was preparing to file. They worked for 2.5 hours. When Marcus rose to leave, Gerald Hargrove said, "I want to apologize again for what happened in the lobby." Marcus said, "You don't need to apologize, the firm does." Gerald said, "The firm will." Gerald said, "The firm will." He meant it, but neither of them knew yet how completely. Before he left the building that morning, Marcus stopped in the lobby one more time, not to say anything, not to confront anyone. Brittany had already retreated to a back office. Someone had quietly redirected her from the desk the moment the partners appeared. The lobby was busier now, 9:15, associates and clients moving through. No one paid him any particular attention as he walked to the elevator bank and pressed the button for the ground floor. He stood there, holding the brown paper bag with one pastry still inside, the one he had been saving for himself the same way he always did, and thought about his father. Elijah Webb had been turned away from more rooms than Marcus could count, not lobbies, courtrooms, entire institutions that had posted signs and drawn lines and built systems specifically designed to ensure that a man like Elijah Webb understood he was not welcome. And Elijah Webb had walked through every single one of those doors anyway, with a notebook under his arm and his head up, and made the law shield people who had nothing left but the hope that it could. The security footage from the Hargrove Tower lobby was reviewed by the firm's human resources director that same afternoon. The timestamp showed the entire sequence: Brittany's refusal, the phone call, the guards arriving, the hand on the arm of a sitting federal judge, the walk toward the door. The HR director watched it twice. Then she called David Caldwell. She said, "We have a significant problem." That is not a strong enough word for what they had. By the end of the business day, the firm's general counsel had been briefed. By the following morning, outside litigation specialists had been engaged. The footage was preserved. Witness statements were collected from the 4 employees who had been in the lobby. The man in the charcoal suit turned out to be a second-year associate named Thomas Yee. He wrote 4 pages. Brittany was placed on administrative leave pending investigation before noon on the day after the incident. She was terminated 8 days later following a formal review that found multiple prior incidents in her employment record, complaints from 2 other visitors, both black, that had been noted and filed and never escalated. The firm's managing partners issued a written statement acknowledging a failure of institutional accountability. They did not stop there. Gerald Hargrove, who had built his firm's pro bono practice over 20 years, convened an emergency meeting of the full partnership. The outcome of that meeting was a commitment to a comprehensive review of lobby access protocols, visitor documentation systems, and staff training across all 3 of the firm's offices. The story did not stay internal. A paralegal who had been in the lobby that morning posted a thread on a legal industry forum describing what she had witnessed. She did not name Marcus Webb. She did not need to. The thread was shared 400 times in 18 hours. A legal affairs journalist picked it up. By the time the journalist had verified the details and published the story, it had a headline that would run in 17 publications in 4 days. The story hit the wire on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, the State Bar's Office of Professional Responsibility had opened a file. By the following Wednesday, the American Bar Association's Diversity and Inclusion Division had issued a formal statement citing the incident as emblematic of a systemic failure in how legal institutions screen and treat visitors based on appearance. The 2 security guards who had placed hands on Marcus Webb were identified in the footage. The firm's security contractor launched its own internal review. 1 guard resigned, the other was retrained and relocated. Both the firm and the security company entered into a confidential settlement with Marcus Webb's attorney, a settlement which Marcus quietly directed in its entirety to the Equal Justice Initiative. He did not hold a press conference. He did not give an interview. He returned to his courtroom on the Monday after the incident and presided over a motion hearing on a copyright dispute as if nothing had happened. His clerks noticed that he seemed, if anything, calmer than usual. The housing discrimination case that Caldwell, Hargrove, and Stein had brought him in to advise on was filed in federal court 11 weeks after the lobby incident. Marcus Webb did not preside over it. He had properly recused himself given his prior consulting role. The case was assigned to another judge, but the filing and the weight of the firms involved and the detail with which 412 families had been documented and represented made it one of the most significant civil rights housing suits in the city's history. The housing authority settled 18 months later. The settlement included $2 million in damages to affected families, a court-supervised reform of the authority's application and review process, and mandatory civil rights training for all staff at director level and above. 412 families, 11 years of denials, one morning in a marble lobby. 1 year after the lobby incident, Caldwell, Hargrove, and Stein announced the creation of a new annual fellowship, a fully funded position for a law student from an underrepresented background to spend 1 year embedded in the firm's civil rights practice. The fellowship was endowed at $1, $4 million. It was named the Elijah Webb Fellowship after Marcus's father. Gerald Hargrove called Marcus personally to tell him before the announcement went public. He said, "I hope this is appropriate." Marcus was quiet for a moment. He said, "My father would have considered it more than appropriate." He paused again. He said, "He used to say that the law is a shield. Most people only ever see it as a sword." Gerald said, "He was right." Marcus said, "He usually was." The first Elijah Webb Fellow was a 24-year-old woman from the city's Eastern District, the same district at the center of the housing suit. She had grown up in one of the apartment complexes named in the original complaint. She had watched her mother be denied housing twice. She had decided at 16 that she was going to be a lawyer. She was. On her first day, she set her things down in the office that had been assigned to her. On the desk she found a small wrapped package. Inside was a notebook. The cover was new, the pages were blank. There was a note in handwriting she did not recognize. It said, "The law is not a weapon. It is a shield. Use it that way." She read it twice. Then she opened the notebook to the first page and began to write. And outside the window, 3 floors below, the city moved the way it always did, indifferent, busy, unaware. But in that small office, something had been passed forward, something old and careful and necessary, a shield handed from one generation to the next, still sharp, still needed, still real. If you've ever walked into a room and been made to feel like you didn't belong there, simply because of how you looked, what you wore, or who you were, then you already know what Marcus Webb felt in that lobby. Like this story, please share it. Subscribe if you're new here, and tell me in the comments, have you ever had a moment where someone dismissed you before you could even say a word? What did you do? Here's what really gets me about this story. It's not the receptionist, it's not the guards, it's the lobby. It's those 20-30 seconds of silence when every person in that room saw what was happening and no one moved. Because that is the moment the real choice was made. Not by Brittany, by everyone else. By the man in the charcoal suit who looked at his phone. By the women at the coffee station who pulled their bags closer. That silence, that is the thing that made all of it possible. Marcus Webb didn't need saving. He was never in any real danger of losing. But those people in the lobby, they had a chance to be something other than spectators. And they weren't. Not until it was safe. Not until the partners were already there. So my question for you is this. What kind of person are you when the room goes quiet and everyone is waiting to see what happens next? Think about that. Drop your answer below.